Celeste is one of the most important games of 2018. Through the lens of retro nostalgia, the game tells a nuanced, bittersweet story of a person who is trying to better understand her own mental health. It's a meaningful game, and it's been showered with praise for its accomplishment. But the story behind Celeste is just as poignant. This is the tale of Matt Thorson, an indie creator who learned the benefit of relying on others, and of embracing, instead of running from, his own anxiety and emotional challenges. Matt Thorson always wanted to make games. When he was young, he would fill notebooks with his own level designs, coming up with ideas for his own 2D platformers that were heavily inspired by Super Mario Bros. Games were an escape for Matt. When the world got too hectic and confusing, he'd retreat into the 16-bit world of his Super Nintendo. Considering the emotional impact that these games had on him, it made sense that he wanted to try making his own similar interactive experiences. His mother, eager to support her son's creative hobby, found the tool Game Maker and helped him to get involved with a community of hobbyist game creators that would help teach him how to make his ideas a reality. This community was important to Matt. He wasn't simply making games in isolation, but with peers to help and support him. Through his early days with Game Maker, Matt made lifelong friends. As Matt got older, he got better and better at making games, and he began earning a small amount of money as a developer. His small side projects were hardly a huge deal at the time, but they brought in enough pocket money to keep him going, and it was fun to make games as a part-time job. By his time at university, these side projects were paying his rent and tuition. When it came time to graduate, Matt found himself at a crossroads. He'd initially decided to study at university in order to get a job at a games studio, but he was doing just fine financially by himself, so what was the point of joining a studio at all? Matt decided to go things alone. This was a life-changing epiphany, and it shaped his progression as a developer for years to come. A couple of years after college, Matt and a friend, Alec Halalka, worked together in a game jam, looking to create a game that was inspired by The Legend of Zelda. They had plans to create a wide variety of weapons for the game, but once they'd implemented a simple bow and arrow system, they realised that this was so much fun they didn't need any other gameplay gimmicks. Matt and a few other game developer friends gravitated together, leading to a constant stream of casual parties at his apartment. It was in this environment that Matt started reworking his game. He started building a local multiplayer mode so that he and his friends could all play together. This proved to be a big hit. As the group laughed and joked, they rushed around an arena, firing arrows at each other. From each party, Matt gained a better idea of how he could tweak the game to make it more enjoyable, and thus, his first major success, Towerfall, was born. Despite having been involved with the game's original inception, Alec didn't stick around for the entirety of development. Instead, he, also an accomplished game developer in his own right, began working on another game with another friend, Scott Benson. This game would become Night in the Woods, which, after a successful Kickstarter, became an indie darling in its own right. Matt, Alec, and some other friends, including Noel Berry, all decided to club together to move into a shared house. They brought with them the party atmosphere from Matt's apartment, but also developed a kind of familial community. They felt like a family, all working on their own creative projects but coming together for meals and blowing off steam together when work got too intense. As Matt worked to finish Towerfall, he had to make decisions about what to do next with his game. Against all the advice of his peers, he decided to sign an exclusivity deal with a single platform, the then upcoming Android-based games console, the Wii. As strange as this idea sounded, Matt felt that it was a smart move. Developing for a more popular platform, like the PlayStation 3, felt like too big of a leap, He wanted to make something that would go out to a smaller audience, and the Ouija felt perfect. This turned out to be a smart idea. The Ouija, bereft of any other big hits, was a platform where Towerfall could shine. Matt managed to sell 7,000 copies of the game on the system, which he put down to a lack of competition from any other big exclusive titles that might steal his thunder. Matt had pretty much everything he needed in life. His game was doing well, and making enough money to support a one-person development team, plus the game's 2 artists. But Matt was definitely guilty of working himself too hard. He'd end up caught up on some challenge for days, straining to find a solution without being able to take breaks. The biggest help in these moments was his surrogate family of game developers, a group that all spent time together, shared together, and helped each other through the tough ups and downs of game design. This support network was important to him. Aside from anything else, it kept him from feeling lonely when his mood took a dip. As Matt began making a PlayStation 4 re-release of his game, titled Towerfall Ascension, he began to feel anxious. He was worried that the game might upset the delicate balance of his house. Commenters, having latched onto Towerfall as an indicator of big things to come, were predicting that its sequel would be a much bigger deal now that it was going to debut on more popular gaming platforms. George Broussard, the creator of Duke Nukem 3D, even messaged Matt to ask him if he was ready to become a millionaire. Matt was definitely not ready. In fact, he was very anxious about the whole idea. Sure, he wanted lots of people to play his game, but he was afraid that his family of game designers would fall apart if he got too wealthy. It was, then, something of a relief when the game only managed to bring in about $500,000. This was still a lot of money, but not enough to break up Matt's family. What came next, though, would be a far greater challenge. Matt and another member of his little gaming community were about to begin on a small project that would change their lives forever. Celeste was never meant to be a big deal. Matt and his housemate Noel began experimenting with a Pico 8, an imaginary games console that can be emulated on a real PC. Over the course of 4 days, they threw together a simple platforming game about climbing a mountain. They named this game Celeste, and released it online for free. The project finished, they moved on. Then, a couple of months later, the pair began pondering what more they could do with the basic idea. Matt was inspired by his favourite film, Whisper of the Heart. He wanted to make a game that was more somber, more reflective than the frenetic multiplayer action of Towerfall. What would happen if he and Noel stripped away the combat present in Towerfall to instead focus totally on platforming? What if they used this game to tell a more involved story about personal struggles and challenges? At first, the pair assumed that Celeste would only take a few months to complete. Very quickly, it became apparent that this was a far bigger project than they'd initially anticipated. They worked hard to make the lead character, Madeline, feel as fleshed out and well-rounded as possible. She wasn't to be simply a blank slate, as many game protagonists are. Instead, she had wants, dreams, desires, and her own personal demons. Matt drew particular influence from the work of feminist frequencies Anita Sarkeesian. He was a big fan of her Tropes vs. Women series, and had even included a character based on Anita in an expansion for Towerfall. He wanted Madeline to feel like more than just a collection of gaming tropes, and instead, like a believable female character. Even as this new Celeste began to take form, and as the pair incorporated themes of mental illness into the story, it was unclear where all this was going. And then, suddenly, things clicked for Matt. He'd always suffered from anxiety. When he was younger, he'd used his Super Nintendo as a way to escape these feelings. That was what had led him to make games in the first place. But game making also triggered his anxiety. He'd be stuck working to escape his own mental illness, trying to beat it back, but making things worse for himself at the same time. Celeste was a reflection of this. It became a game about trying to run away, to escape from anxiety and depression, to climb a mountain and complete an insurmountable task in a desperate attempt to achieve peace and accept that some things are beyond our control. When Celeste finally released, 2 years after the project had initially been started, it did so to critical acclaim. It became one of the best-loved indie games on the Switch overnight, and picked up many numerous accolades, including winning Best Indie Game at the 2018 Game Awards. While Celeste was a more solitary game than Towerfall, it seemed that Matt's exploration of anxiety and depression resonated with a lot of people. He was clearly far from alone. The moral of the story is that trials can be turned into something beautiful. Matt Thorson reflected on and embraced his own personal anxieties and mental health struggles. He found a way to use them to create a video game that has touched the lives of thousands of people. Take care of yourself. Surround yourself with people who care about you. Your personal challenges might be hard to bear, but if you are patient, you can turn negative experiences into something unique and wonderful.